Wonderful. Okay, well, Mary, I know we talked a little earlier this week, and if you just wanted to kind of provide us a little bit of an overview of your 50 years of local government experience, I think we'd love to hear what that was like, and maybe kind of see what you've seen over the last 50 years as far as what's changed, what's on the horizon. I think we'd find that pretty interesting.
Great, Jennifer. First, before I start that, I just want to say Robert Gray is one of my favorite people. And I see on my screen Helen Yang. Helen Yang is one of my favorite people too. Boy, she saves us. We are working with HdL on our cashiering system and business license. And she's wonderful, 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 wonderful. So anyway, let me just say, it's nice to see your face, Helen.
Thank you.
And you, Robert, of course. Yeah, so first of all, boy, 50 years. Are we sure that that's correct? I don't think that's correct.
I don't know. That's a lot.
let's pretend we never heard that, okay?
Okay.
So I just don't want to go into gory detail, but let me just say that I started in the city of Pasadena in the library, the public works department, the city manager's budget office, and then through the grace of God or good fortune, the finance director asked me to apply for his assistant finance director job. My degree is not in accounting or economics, but it was in something that helped me to think. And so he asked me if I would apply because he said, you really work very hard. You know, I haven't seen anybody that works that hard. So I said, okay, good. And I applied and was very fortunate to become the assistant finance director in Pasadena, and then subsequently the finance director, which was a great job. But then Northern California called me and I came up to Sunnyvale in 1995 and worked there until 2010 when I had decided to retire. But then my good friend Bill Statler called and said, would you mind being the interim in San Luis Obispo for 6 months or so? Well, 2 years later, I left there. And then my good friend Harriet Commons called me and said, hey, could you come to Fremont and close out on the RDA, the Redevelopment Association? So I said, sure, no problem, 5-6 months. I'm still there. I've been in Fremont since 2012, and I'm still there doing, as Helen will attest, implementation of various computer projects. And so I think the one message I would give to you is work hard, don't miss any opportunities, and network. So that's my story. How did I meet Lloyd and Bob? Now there's a story. So Bob Hinderleiter showed up in the city of Pasadena while I was the assistant, and my boss and I met him, and he was very soft-spoken, and he said, hey, I think I have a way to get you more sales tax, which is of course music to all of our ears. And so we signed up with him, and then it worked very well. And then he brought on Lloyd de Lamas, who was a pistol, and he just kicked it up a notch. And so we had a fabulous relationship with them. I have some Lloyd stories, but I really don't want to tell them to this many people. But suffice it to say that he was wonderful. He still is wonderful. I had coffee with him about a month ago. Still is as inquisitive and energetic as ever. So it was wonderful to know them from the inception. Then your software group started, and your property tax group, or the property tax group, started, and the rest is history. So after I retired from Sunnyvale, several years later, Andy Nickerson approached me and asked if I would like to be on the board of directors, and I was extremely honored because I think HdL is one of the most ethical and very well respected companies in our line of work. So I was very honored and thrilled, and I've been on the board. I honestly can't remember when. I don't know whether you do, Robert, but in any case, it's been since several years before the pandemic. And it's been a pleasure. Did you want to ask questions, Jennifer, or do you want me just to keep talking?
Whatever you'd like to do. I know we had some that we talked about. If you want to just talk about that, and then we could open it up and see if anybody else has questions.
Okay, so one of the questions is, what's the biggest change you've seen in local government in the last 50 years? And I can't even begin to describe what it was like that long ago. I see Joan on the screen too, Joan Aguilar, and she's nodding. When in Pasadena, I was the first female department director, except for the city clerk. And now I would venture to say that it's so much more diverse and so much more representative. But I think the main thing in local government and finance is the rapid change. Used to be that you knew stuff, you really knew stuff. And now it's changing so rapidly. You have to constantly keep up with what's happening in accounting, what's happening legally, what might be happening. I was at a recent retreat and someone said to me, a finance director said to me, does it get any easier to be a finance director? I was thinking of lying, but I had this respect for this person. So I said, no, in fact, it's getting harder. So I think that's the pressure and the complexity of things are so changing so rapidly, like in technology and everything, but just in the scale of things. And meanwhile, in finance in particular, the resources are not growing. Someone said to me, have you ever heard a city council say, gee, let's add more accountants to the staff? No, they don't. They add police officers or whoever, but they generally don't add to the finance department, which I guess is why HdL, among many other things, has been so successful, because if you can provide an expert service without much brain damage, it's enormously popular. So I think that's why you're seeing so many of these things that are being kind of offered and taken advantage of in local government. But I say from the time I started until now, yow, yow, quite the difference. As a woman in the local government space, any lessons or guidance to share? No, I don't think so right now. I think in the olden days, there was quite a bit of guidance, but I think women in local government, and particularly women in finance, have proven themselves. And so you're dealt with fairly equally. It's a good place to be. It's a very good place to be. I think just, again, use your initiative, use your, if someone offers you an opportunity, do not say it's not in my job description. Just say, I'd love to learn about that.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson. I think we all get those choices daily on what else you can take on and learn. And you really just have to be ready to change, because everything is always changing.
That's for sure. Boy,
right? I know.
Yeah. Let's see. Can I share any insight into what happens at a typical board meeting? You know what they say, what happens in Brea stays in Brea? No, actually not. It's a very congenial group. We used to meet in person, which I very much enjoyed, because it was nice to get to know my fellow board members. Recently, we've been Zooming. I think we're going to have an in-person in December. I'm looking forward to that. But generally, we are filled in on what's happening. Often one of the leaders of a group, such as Robert, or someone comes in and fills us in on what the trends are, what's happening. We also get regular financial statements, so we can see how we're watching your stock, and we're making sure that everything is going along. We usually, if there's a potential acquisition or a thought of an acquisition, for example, the Brea office building or the software company, which, may I say, was one of the smartest things that we ever did, or you ever did, those kinds of things. And then any kind of thought ideas about what trends are happening in the field. Two of the newer members are not local government people. One is an entrepreneur, and the other one, I think, is an IT. Well, you met Henry last time, but the other new gentleman is an entrepreneur, and that's very helpful to see what the trends are outside, not just closed in on our little environment. So it's a very good group, and I think many of us are pretty good friends, and it's very helpful. It's very informative, and I hope that we are guarding everybody's stock and their value in the company.
Nice.
One of the questions was, have you ever worked with another ESOP company? No. But that's one of the things that attracted me about HdL, was the ESOP has the ability to, you make your own value, which I think is very good. I wish most of us had that opportunity, but you do make your own value, and you have an investment in the company, which is obviously been reflected by the results. So I give it, I would work with another ESOP company. They're very few and far between, and I think that's too bad. Where do you see HdL? So I have a spam on my other line. Sorry. Where do you see HdL 10 years from now? I think the space for providing services, specialized services to cities is amazing. I think Henry may have shared this with you, but my feeling is it's important to maximize all the revenues you're entitled to before you try to get any more revenues, or before you try to cut expenses. And I will give you an example. When I got to San Luis Obispo, it was in 2010, and they had just realized that this downturn was permanent, or, not just a quirk. And so every department was asked to cut 10%. Well, I was in finance, and I just got there, and I'm looking around, and I didn't see any extra people. So I said, okay, well, we have purchasing. Let's see if we can cut 10% of our expenses without cutting people. So we did. We called the vendors, we called software companies, and we said, hey, we're out in the middle of a downturn. Can you give us a break on our prices? And we more than made our 10% just by reducing expenses. And so I think you can also look at the same model on the revenue side and say, why wouldn't I do business license discovery and find out who's paying, but who's late, but also who's not out there, who's not paying, that we could then get the fair share, because it is taxes and revenues ought to be applied equally to everybody, not just whether you happen to sign up. So I see that the specialized space really, really growing in the next 10 years.
That's good.
And finally, what is HdL doing right? I think that's it. I think you're focused. You understand who your audience is. Here's another anecdote. A friend of mine just moved to Georgia, and so went to the Georgia GFOA conference and texted me and said, HdL was just made a presentation on revenues, and it was very well received.
Nice.
I thought, they're moving to Georgia. And I'm looking at Joan Aguilar. It's Ronnie Campbell was the one that texted me. So,
oh, nice.
So, yeah. So, I think what you're doing right is focusing, understanding who your audience is, who your clients are, and I guess the other thing I'd say is providing really, really good service. And I happen to be looking at Robert and Helen on the screen, and I can tell you that Helen is providing us amazing service, and that's why we keep on coming back.
Nice.
So that's all the prepared questions I have. Does anybody have another question?
I got a question, Mary.
Okay.
Just because we're trying to get to know you, right? So I'm just wondering, what got you interested in your line of work? Like, who decides to just go through all that? Like,
that's a very good question, because that's not how I started. I did not have good counseling in college. And so I ended up getting a degree in English literature and Spanish literature, which I suppose could be considered useful, but not so much. And then, so I ended up going to library school, and I happened to be working in the library, putting myself through library school, when someone came up to me and said, hey, would you like a job? It was the old days. 6 months later,
well.
Yeah. And so I then realized that was not what I wanted to do. So I went to a vocational counseling over at UCLA. They had an extensive vocational counseling center, and I learned that was not my strength. My strength was in accounting, law, those kinds of things. So then I went to school 10 years at night to get all of the classes I need to become to get into the line of work that I wanted to be. And that was really how I started. Secondly, the people coming to me and asking me if I would, this gentleman asked me if I wanted a job. My finance director asked me if I wanted a job. So, and once I got into finance, it was like, this is it. This is my passion. And then I still feel that way. That's why people say, why are you still working? Because I love the work. I love the nature of the work. It's just, and it adds so much value. You know,
Right.
we really add value to the citizens of our cities and our counties and our state. And I'm sure every one of you all do too. And you should be extremely proud of that. You know, the several $100,000 that the sales tax brings into the city of Fremont every year is we're very grateful for that, along with the business tax and all the other things. So how can you not feel good about it?
Well, as someone who had to retake finance in college, I'm wondering how you found so much joy in that career path. But I also wondered, did you have a mentor that kind of really made a difference that helped you get to this where you are today?
Yeah, I would say two. One was when I was in the library, going through library school, and I realized that that was not what I wanted to do. And I had gone to UCLA Vocational Counseling Center. I took the letter they sent me over to the assistant city manager in the city of Pasadena and said, look, they say I'm really good at this stuff. I think you should hire me. And they did. They said, oh, well, you must be. So they did. And then once I got into the finance department, my boss, who's sadly since deceased, was the best mentor in the world. He was absolutely the best mentor in the world. Every day we would have a meeting at 5 o'clock. We'd go over everything. We'd discuss what was happening, what the positions we should take. He showed me the way to do things correctly. He helped. I never will be so grateful as for him. And so honestly, that's what I'm hoping to do with others. I try in my career to find someone who has initiative and learn how and see if I can help them along too.
Love that. That goes with our core value. Was it give generously and be authentic, grateful, and humble? I like that. So I have the core
Yeah.
values up there. That's why I looked up. But
I
it
love
looks
that, and I like your wallpaper too. Yeah, I know, I
Thank
like your
you.
wallpaper.
Made it myself. It looks like Joan has her hand up.
Hey,
Hey,
Mary and everyone, I just want to give a shout out because with your reference to mentorship, for those of you that aren't aware, and I know Robert alluded to it, I mean, Mary's been tremendously involved in so many leadership groups. I got to know her through CSMFO, and she has been a tremendous influence on myself, as well as so many others in CSMFO leadership, behind the scenes, bringing up people in our profession. And I just kind of want to ask, I mean, when we look at the state of our profession in government, even with HdL, you see the sort of hiring issues people are having today. How do we get people? I know CSMFO, we're trying to do like a student engagement type situation with let's get people interested in finance, because a lot of people, it is a frightening kind of, endeavor. It's like, oh no, numbers, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But there are different aspects of government or our company with IT, whatever the case may be. What do you see as an avenue to try and encourage people to get into these endeavors and have it be a satisfying prospect?
Well, of course, one thing is to find good people and then snag them. I know HdL snagged you, and I think Jim Troop was snagged along with several other, I don't know if he's on the call, but so the government finance officers recently commissioned a report on the hiring problem in government. And they just recently released it actually, and it showed that there's a big crisis, and they identified some problems, but they also identified some things we can do, such as being a little more clear about the value of working in government, and particularly in finance, and the career paths, and the value that you provide to your community, and the kinds of things. So they're, in other words, a little more as opposed to, oh no, just a little more awareness. But I know there's so much more involved in trying to get a hold of students or people that you see, and we constantly take a look and say, oh, we know that person, let's see if they might be interested in a job. So it's tough though. I mean, it's really a crisis. I just sat on a panel last week for a large city, and there were 2 candidates. It's like, yike. Yeah, so let me also add, if you have any opportunity to get any kind of training at all, get it. Take it. If you do it through the finance officers group, it's fairly inexpensive. And then when you do go for an interview and they say, well, what do you know about ERP systems? And you say, well, I've never really managed them, but I did take a class, or I'm now aware of whatever. And you have a little more on your resume and a little more to talk about in an interview. So I so believe in training. We offer a great deal of training, and it's so valuable. It's just so valuable to broaden your mind and your resume too.
I'd like to make a comment. Hi, Mary, this is David.
David McPherson. Hey, how are you?
So speaking of mentors, so I've known Mary for 30 years since she was in Pasadena. We worked on a lot of sales tax stuff in the early years, but I want to especially thank Mary for encouraging my former employer for hiring me as a deputy finance director when I was in San Jose. So she does share that mentoring for many of us that have been the path that she's created. Thank you.
Only for the good ones. I'm nice to see you too, David. I haven't seen you in a while. All right, you guys.
All right,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you
Take
so much,
care.
Mary,
Mary,
for your
everyone.
time. Nice to meet you.
Right.